The night was cold and silent. A thin mist covered the human fields, and the crops stood tall under the pale light of two moons. A shadow moved between the rows, careful, hungry, and afraid. It was her, an alien widow, skin marked with faint glowing lines, eyes sharp but tired. She carried nothing, no weapon, no bag, only the desperate thought of food. She bent low and pulled a root from the soil, her stomach twisted in pain. It had been days since she ate, she whispered to herself, promising her lost child that she would not die. Not yet. Her hands shook as she reached for more. Every sound of the night felt like thunder to her ears. But still she took, because hunger was stronger than fear. Suddenly, a light swept across the field. A beam from a lantern, strong and steady. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Steps pressed against the soil, slow and heavy. A man's voice called out, sharp and full of command. "Who's there?" She tried to run, but the light caught her. The figure stepped closer, a tall human farmer, broad shoulders, face hardened by years of work and war. He carried an old rifle in one hand and his other hand was steady, ready to act. Their eyes met, his cold and watchful, hers wide with fear. The silence between them was heavy, heavier than the mist. "You steal from me," he said, his voice calm but edged with iron. She dropped the roots and raised her hands. "Please," she whispered, her words broken. "I only want to live." The farmer narrowed his eyes, studying her glowing skin and strange clothes. He knew her kind, enemies of the past war. He had lost friends to them. Why should he let this one live? He stepped closer, the rifle pointed. She did not run, she did not fight. She fell to her knees in the dirt. Tears burned her eyes, her pride gone. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I will work your fields by day," she said, "and I will warm you by night." The farmer stood still, surprised by her words. He expected lies, tricks, not an offer like that. He could have ended her right there. One pull of the trigger, no one would question him. But something in her face stopped him. It was not only hunger, it was sorrow, the kind he had seen in soldiers who lost everything. The night was quiet again, only the sound of insects in the grass. He lowered the rifle slightly. "Stand up," he ordered, his voice hard. She rose slowly, shaking, waiting for the shot that never came. Her heart pounded, her knees weak, but still, she stood before him, broken but not begging anymore. The farmer stared at her for a long time. He did not trust her, not yet. But he saw no weapon, no strength left in her body, only hunger and maybe truth. He said, "If you work, you eat. But if you betray me, you die." She nodded quickly, her glowing eyes shining with fear and hope. "I will not betray," she whispered. "I have nowhere else." He turned and motioned for her to follow. She stepped behind him, careful, still trembling. Every sound of the soil under her feet felt like chains. The house ahead was small but strong. Built of wood and stone, smoke rose from its chimney and the smell of old fire carried warmth she had not felt in months. He stopped at the door and looked back at her. "You sleep in the barn," he said. "Tomorrow you start work." She bowed her head. "Yes," she answered softly. The door closed behind him. She was left alone in the night air, her chest tight, her hands empty. But she was alive. For the first time in many nights, she had a chance. She walked to the barn, its doors creaking. The hay smelled strange to her alien senses, but it was shelter. She lay down, curling into herself. The farmer inside the house stayed awake, staring at the rifle on his table. He thought of her words, her offer. Was she desperate enough to be true, or clever enough to be dangerous? In the fields, the mist thickened. Unseen eyes in the distance watched the small farm, and somewhere in the sky, far above, a faint light blinked, a signal from an orbiting ship. Neither of them knew that this meeting, born from hunger and fear, would grow into something far greater, a bond that would test both their worlds. The night held its breath. The story of survival and trust had only begun. Morning came with a pale red sun rising above the hills. The farm looked calm, but inside both hearts carried storm. The alien widow woke from the barn floor, her body stiff, her stomach still hollow. She touched the rough wood around her, strange and foreign. It was not home, but it was safety, at least for now. Outside, the human farmer was already in the fields. His strong hands worked with the soil, the same soil she had stolen from. He did not look at her when she stepped out. His silence was heavy, like a wall built of stone. But she knew she had to break it, or she would not last. She walked toward him, her steps slow, her head bowed. "Tell me what to do," she said softly. The farmer glanced at her, his eyes cold, but he spoke. "Pull the weeds, keep the water channels clear, don't touch what is mine." She nodded quickly, kneeling in the dirt, her glowing skin catching the light of the sun. The work was hard, harder than anything she had done since the war ended. Her thin fingers bled against the rough ground, but she kept going. Every root she pulled felt like a promise. Every handful of weeds was a small price for a single meal. The farmer watched, silent, testing her. Would she complain? Would she run? Would she fight? At noon, he dropped a piece of bread and a cup of water on the ground near her. She grabbed them with shaking hands. Whispering thanks, he did not answer. But he noticed she shared half of the bread with a bird that hopped near her feet. Strange, he thought. Enemies do not share food. Still, he said nothing. When the sun lowered, the fields shone golden. She stood, her body weak but her spirit burning. He walked past her, his voice flat. "You survived one day, but words are cheap. We will see if you last more." She did not reply, only followed him back to the house. The smell of warm stew floated from the door, but he closed it behind him, leaving her again in the barn. That night, the silence was broken. A howl echoed in the distance. Not human, not animal. She sat up quickly, fear rising in her chest. Through the cracks of the barn wall, she saw shadows moving. Figures more than one circling the farm. Her blood ran cold. She crept outside, crouching low. Her glowing lines on her skin made her a target in the moonlight. She tried to cover them with dirt, but it was too late. One of the shadows turned, staring straight at her. A hiss cut the air, words in her own alien tongue. "Traitor!" Her heart froze. It was her kind, scavengers who roamed at night. They had seen her working in human fields. They had judged her already. She stumbled back, whispering no, 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 but they raised weapons crude and sharp. The farmer's door opened with a crash. The rifle in his hands gleamed under the moon. He fired once into the air, the sound cracking like thunder. The shadows froze, then slipped away into the mist. Only silence remained, broken by her shaking breath. The farmer turned to her, his voice sharp. "You bring danger to my land." She fell to her knees, tears cutting lines down her dirt-covered face. "No," she cried. "I did not call them. They hate me too." He studied her face, her broken voice, and though doubt burned in his chest, he lowered the rifle. Inside, he sat her at his table for the first time. The stew was hot, the bread warm. She ate quickly, like someone who did not know if tomorrow's food would come. He watched her closely, every movement, every word, but he saw no lie, only hunger, only pain. Finally, he spoke. "Why did you steal? Why risk death for roots in my soil?" Her hands shook, her eyes glowed with hidden sorrow. "I had a child," she whispered. Her voice broke, but she forced the words. "They starved because I had nothing. I swore I would not follow them. I swore I would live, even if it meant stealing from my enemies." The farmer's chest tightened, though his face stayed stone. He had buried friends, brothers from the war. He knew that sound in her voice, the sound of someone who had already lost everything. The night stretched on. The lantern burned low. He leaned back, staring at the rifle resting on the table. "Finally," he said, "you will stay, you will work. But if danger comes again, I will not protect you twice." She nodded, her eyes wet, her voice a whisper. Then I will protect you. The words hung in the air, not lies, not bargains, but a strange truth neither could explain. Outside, the mist crawled over the fields. In the distance, unseen lights blinked in the sky, ships circling, waiting, watching. The uneasy bargain had been made, but peace was fragile, and danger had only begun. The night had ended, but the fear had not. When morning came, the farmer found strange marks near the barn, footprints pressed deep into the soft soil, too many to belong to just her. He knelt down, touching the dirt, his eyes narrowing. The tracks were fresh, too close to the house, too bold. Someone had walked there while they both slept. He stood slowly, his rifle tight in his hands. The alien widow stepped out of the barn, her hair tangled, her face pale from little sleep. She followed his gaze to the prints, and her breath caught. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Not yours, not mine." The farmer's voice was hard. "Then whose?" She did not answer, but her body shook. She knew, though she could not say it aloud. Her own people, wandering scavengers, had come again. They had not attacked this time, only circled, only watched, but their message was clear. They would return. All day she worked harder in the fields, her back bent, her fingers raw. The farmer said little, only glanced at her again and again. Trust was fragile, thin as a thread ready to break. But when the wind carried strange sounds, both of them lifted their heads at the same time. Something was out there, something waiting. That evening, when the sun bled into the hills, the farmer lit his lantern and walked the edges of the farm. The widow followed, silent, her eyes scanning the shadows. She remembered the word they had thrown at her. Traitor. It rang in her ears, heavy with shame. Her people saw her as lost, the humans saw her as enemy. She belonged nowhere, not to any world. The farmer stopped by the fence. "You knew they would come," he said, his tone sharp. She lowered her head. "They call me traitor, they hate me more than you do." He studied her face, her glowing lines dim with sorrow. For a moment he saw not an enemy, not a thief, but someone hunted by all sides. Still, he asked, "Then why stay here?" She met his eyes, her voice steady now. "Because hunger kills slower than loneliness, and here at least I am seen." The words struck him deeper than he expected. He turned away, hiding the storm in his chest. He remembered the battlefield, the faces of men who said similar words before they died. Perhaps this alien widow carried the same weight. That night they kept watch together. He sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees. She sat near the barn door, holding a rusted tool like a weapon. The silence between them was uneasy, but it was shared silence. Hours crawled, the mist thickened, and then came the sound. Soft footsteps around the far edge of the field. The farmer raised his rifle, the lantern light swinging across the dark. Shapes moved between the rows of crops, quick, ghost-like. The widow's heart raced, her voice shaking. "They test us. They want to see if we are weak," he hissed. Quiet, but he did not lower the gun. The shadows slipped away again, vanishing into the night mist. Only the wind remained, whispering through the grass. He turned on her suddenly, his voice low but fierce. "If they return, if they strike, are you with them or with me?" Her answer was fast, desperate, almost angry. "With you," she said, her hands trembling. "I gave you my word, and it is all I have left." Her voice cracked, but she did not look away. He searched her eyes, looking for lies, but saw only pain. He lowered the rifle, though his doubt remained. When dawn came, the farm looked untouched, but both of them knew the truth. The danger was growing. The widow bent to work again, though her eyes kept drifting to the horizon. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow made her stiffen. The farmer said nothing, but his jaw stayed tight, his mind heavy. At midday, he found her by the water channel. She was staring at the sky, her face pale. He followed her gaze, and his blood ran cold. Far above, against the blue, a faint light blinked, not a star, not a bird, but a ship, small, distant, but watching, waiting. The farmer cursed under his breath. He had hoped the war was far, that peace would last. But the sky told another story. The widow spoke softly, almost to herself. They are not here for me. Alone, they are here for you too. He turned sharply. What do you mean? She shook her head, afraid to say more, but her silence was an answer in itself. That night the shadows did not return to the fields, but the light in the sky blinked again, steady and patient. The farmer sat at his table, the rifle close. The widow curled in the barn, whispering to ghosts of her lost family. Both knew the bargain they had made was no shield against the storm to come. The shadows in the dark were not just enemies. They were warnings. Warnings that the world they thought they could escape was closing in. And still, as the night deepened, they watched. Two strangers bound by survival, surrounded by silence. The fields slept, but the war above was waking. The storm came without warning. The farmer woke to the sound of wood cracking. A heavy crash. Shaking the barn, he grabbed his rifle, boots hitting the floor, his heart pounding. The alien widow screamed from outside, her voice sharp with fear. He rushed through the door and saw them. Scavengers, rough and wild, tearing at the barn wall with crude blades. The night was alive with shouts, with growls. Torches burned in the hands of intruders, their faces twisted with hunger and hate. The widow fought with only a wooden pole. Swinging desperately, one scavenger struck her shoulders, sending her falling to the ground. But before another blow could land, the farmer's rifle thundered, the shot echoing across the fields. The scavenger dropped. The others hissed. The firelight flickered over their glowing alien skin, marks like hers. They snarled words in their tongue, calling her traitor, slave. She clutched her side, coughing. They want me dead, because I chose to stay. The farmer stood over her, his rifle steady, his voice like iron. Then they'll have to go through me first. The fight raged across the yard. The farmer fired again, driving them back. The widow, though wounded, picked up a blade dropped in the dirt. She fought beside him, her strikes fast and desperate. The barn shook with the clash, the smell of fire spreading. Together, human and alien defended the small farm, and when the last scavenger fell to the soil, the field went silent again. Smoke rose from the barn, a corner burning. The farmer grabbed a bucket, the widow dragged another. They threw water until the flames died, their hands raw, their lungs choking. Finally, the night grew quiet once more. The barn stood broken, but standing, the widow collapsed onto the ground, breathing hard. Her eyes glistened in the faint moonlight, tears mixing with blood. You saved me, she whispered. The farmer shook his head, wiping sweat from his brow. You fought too. You saved me as much as I saved you. Their eyes locked, not as strangers now, but as survivors bound by the same fight. For the first time, the farmer's voice softened. You're not weak, not useless, not what I thought. The widow's chest rose and fell, her voice trembling. I have nothing left, no people, no family, only my hands and my word. She held his gaze, steady, broken, yet unyielding. And still I will work your fields by day, and I will keep you warm by night if you let me. The farmer turned away, his throat tight. He had sworn never to let his heart open again, but her words struck deep, into scars he thought long buried. When dawn came, the farm was quiet again. The broken boards of the barn were mended with rough nails. The widow worked with one arm bandaged, her face pale but determined. The farmer watched her, a strange respect growing in his eyes. No thief would bleed for him, no spy would fight to defend his home. Yet she had, and it unsettled him more than any battle. That night, he sat at the table, the rifle by his side. She entered quietly, holding something in her hands, a small piece of metal, glowing faintly with alien light. He frowned. What is that? Her voice was low, heavy with guilt. A beacon, she said. I buried it before you found me, in case I needed rescue. The farmer's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. So you lied? He growled. You wanted to call them here, bring them down on me. She shook her head desperately, clutching the device. No, not soldiers, not war. I meant it for peace, for mercy if it ever came. Her voice cracked, tears streaking down her face. I never used it, I swear. I wanted only to live. He rose to his feet, towering over her, the rifle heavy in his hands once more. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Her glowing eyes met his, shining with fear but not deceit. He searched her face, his chest burning, and slowly, he lowered the weapon. Bury it again, he said finally, his voice cold. Bury it deep where no one will ever find it. She nodded quickly, clutching the beacon close. Her body trembled, but relief washed through her. He turned away, staring into the fire, his mind torn between distrust and something else he dared not name. Later, when the farm was dark, the widow lay awake in the barn. Her shoulder throbbed, her heart ached. But in the silence, she remembered his words in the fight. They'll have to go through me first. A human who should hate her had chosen to fight beside her. And though fear still shadowed her heart, a new flame burned quietly. Hope, fragile and dangerous, but alive. Outside, the stars shone cold above the fields. One light blinked brighter than the rest, high in orbit. Watching, waiting, preparing. The walls of the farm were broken, but so were the walls around two guarded hearts. And beyond the horizon, danger moved closer with every passing night. The morning after the raid was heavy with silence. Smoke still clung to the barn and the ground was scarred with blood and ash. The farmer fixed the fence with steady hands, but his eyes kept drifting toward the widow. She worked with quiet determination, though every movement pulled at the wound on her shoulder. Neither spoke of the fight nor of the beacon hidden beneath the soil, but the weight of secrets hung between them like a storm ready to break. By midday, the silence shattered. Dust rose on the horizon, carried by wheels and boots. The farmer narrowed his eyes, his hand tightening on the rifle. He recognized the shape of the patrol wagons. Human soldiers. Their banners carried the mark of the new order, the same order that had promised peace after the war. But peace, he knew, was fragile and cruel. The widow froze when she saw them, her skin glowing faintly with fear. Her breath quickened, her hands clutching the dirt. They will kill me, she whispered. They kill all who remain. The farmer's jaw clenched, his mind racing. He could hand her over and be praised as loyal, or he could hide her and be branded a traitor to his own kind. The patrol reached the edge of the farm. 5 soldiers, armor dull with dust, rifles, polished and ready. Their leader dismounted, his face sharp, his eyes scanning the fields. Farmer, he called, we track reports of alien thieves in this valley. Have you seen any? The widow crouched behind the barn wall, her body trembling, her eyes locked on the farmer's back, waiting for his choice. He stood tall, meeting the soldier's gaze. There are no thieves here, he said, his voice flat. The leader studied, him, suspicion clear in his eyes. We saw signs, the man said, prints, tracks, and smoke from a fight. The farmer shrugged, his face calm. Scavengers came, but they ran off. I dealt with them. No one else here. The soldiers searched, boots stomping through the fields. One drew near the barn, his lantern swinging. The widow pressed herself against the wood, her heart hammering. The soldier's steps came closer, his hand reaching for the door. But before he could open it, the farmer spoke sharply. You doubt me? Search my home if you like, but you waste time while the valley burns. The leader barked an order and the soldiers turned back. Their boots pounded against the soil as they mounted again. We'll be watching, farmer, the leader warned. Loyalty is proven, not spoken. The wagons rolled away, leaving only dust behind. The widow collapsed inside the barn, her breath coming fast. She had been one heartbeat away from discovery. When the farmer entered, she looked up at him, her eyes wet. Why? She asked, her voice breaking. Why lie for me? He placed the rifle on the table, his face carved in stone. Because handing you over would make me no better than them, he said. Her chest tightened, tears sliding down her cheeks. You risk your life, your home, for someone who was once your enemy. He sat heavily on a wooden chair, his hands rough against the table. I have buried too many enemies, too many friends, he said slowly. Maybe I'm tired of burying more. The widow knelt before him, her glowing eyes locked to his. "Then let me stay. Let me fight. Let me be more than a thief in your shadow." Her words burned with desperate honesty, and for the first time, he did not turn away. That night the air was thick with unease. The widow lay awake in the barn, her mind chasing memories of her child, her people, her shame. But above it all, one truth echoed. A human had chosen her life over his safety. She rose quietly, stepping into the moonlight. She placed her hand on the dirt where the beacon was buried. She whispered, "Not yet, not ever. Not while I still breathe." Inside the house, the farmer stared into the fire. The soldier's words replayed in his mind. Loyalty is proven, not spoken. He knew they would return. And next time, they would not leave so easily. He tightened his grip on the rifle, his thoughts torn. By saving her, he had crossed a line. But in his heart, something told him the choice had already been made long before. Outside, the night sky blinked with distant lights. The orbiting ships were closer now, their shadows faint but growing. Two worlds watched the small farm, one ready to punish betrayal, the other ready to demand loyalty. And in the middle stood a farmer and a widow, bound by survival, bound by a dangerous choice. The fields whispered with the wind, carrying a truth neither could deny. The choice had been made, but the cost was yet to come. The valley slept under a heavy sky, but above, fire moved in silence. Ships, dark and vast, drifted over the clouds, their lights blinking like cold stars. The farmer saw them first, standing on his porch at dawn, his eyes locked on the horizon. They were closer now, no longer faint dots, but shadows that swallowed the heavens. The widow stepped out of the barn, her body stiff, her face pale. She followed his gaze, and fear drained the color from her skin. "They are preparing to burn," she whispered, her voice shaking. The farmer's grip tightened on his rifle, though the weapon was useless against what hovered above. "Burn what?" he asked, though the answer already gnawed at his chest. "The valley," she said, her voice breaking. "They believe rebels hide here. They will destroy all, to make sure." The words struck like stone. The farmer's land, his soil, his home, all marked for fire, and with it, every life that still clung to survival in the valley. The widow's hands trembled as she pulled the beacon from beneath the dirt. The faint glow pulsed in her palms, desperate, alive. "This can send a false signal," she said. "We can trick them, make them think their target has already fallen." He stared at the device, his face hard, his thoughts tangled. To use it was to trust her, to risk everything on her word, but to do nothing was to watch the world around him burn. "Show me how," he said finally, his voice sharp but steady. Her eyes widened with relief, and for the first time, a spark of hope lit her features. Together they worked in the barn. The beacon hummed with strange light, filling the wooden walls with an alien glow. Her fingers moved quickly, reprogramming the signal, her lips whispering codes in her native tongue. The farmer watched closely, his hand never far from the rifle. But he saw no trick, only focus, only the urgency of someone who wanted to live. At last she looked up, sweat on her brow, her voice firm. "It is ready. Once it sends, they will believe their fire has already fallen. They will move away." The farmer nodded, but before he could speak, the ground shook. A low rumble rolled. Across the valley, the sound of engines above. The ships had begun their descent, preparing their strike. The widow gasped, clutching the beacon. "We must send it now," she urged. But the farmer's eyes narrowed, pointing to the ridge. Soldiers, human soldiers, marching toward the farm, their banners snapping in the wind. The patrol had returned, larger this time, a dozen strong. Their commander rode ahead, his voice carrying across the fields. "Farmer," he called, "we come for answers. You hide something, and we will find it." The widow's blood ran cold, her eyes darting to the barn door. If they found her with the beacon, both would die. The farmer's jaw clenched, his heart pounding. Between the fire above and the soldiers below, the trap was closing. He turned to her, his voice low but fierce. Hide. Stay silent. No matter what. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. They will kill you if they know. They will burn this land even faster. He grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. Then let them come for me, but not for you. The soldiers stormed the yard, rifles raised. The commander's eyes swept over the broken barn, the scarred soil. You fought scavengers here, he said, but you also shelter one, don't you? The farmer's silence was answer enough. The commander's smile was cold. You think your land worth more than loyalty? We will burn it with the rest. In the barn, the widow clutched the beacon, her heart hammering, every word outside cut. Her like a blade, she could not let him fall for her, not again, not after he had already chosen her once. She stepped into the open, the beacon glowing in her hands. Stop, she cried, her voice carrying across the yard. I am the one. You seek take me, not him. The soldiers raised their rifles, but before they could fire, the farmer stood in front of her. His rifle aimed, his voice a growl. No one touches her. The commander's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. Then you stand against your own kind. You choose her over us. The farmer did not lower his weapon, his voice steady as stone. I choose what is right. Above, the ships hummed louder, fire building in their bellies. The widow lifted the beacon high, her fingers pressing the final command. A burst of light shot into the sky, a false signal tearing upward. The ships paused, their engines shifting. From orbit they saw what they thought was ruin, a valley already burned. Slowly, like shadows retreating, they began to drift away. The soldiers stared, stunned, their commander's rage boiling. You lied, you tricked them, he shouted. The widow lowered the beacon, her voice calm but fierce. No, I saved you all, I saved this valley. The farmer stood beside her, his rifle ready. Leave, he said coldly, or face the fire you feared. The commander glared, but he saw the truth. The sky had spared them. With a sharp gesture, he ordered his men away. The soldiers marched, their boots echoing like thunder. The widow's knees buckled, the beacon falling from her hands. The farmer caught her before she fell, his voice softer now. You did it. You saved us. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes wet with tears. No, she whispered, her voice faint. We saved each other. Above, the ships drifted, but they were not gone, only waiting. The valley breathed for another day, but the fire in the sky had only been delayed, not destroyed, and both knew the final storm was yet to come. The sky burned red at dawn, not from the sun, but from the engines of war. The ships had returned, heavier, louder, filling the heavens with fire. The ground trembled as their shadows swallowed the valley. The widow and the farmer stood at the edge of the fields, silent. Both knew this day would decide everything. The patrol had warned the capital, the farmer's defiance had been reported, the orbiting fleet no longer doubted. They marked the valley as a nest of rebellion. This time, no trick. No false signal would be enough. The ships carried orders to cleanse, to leave nothing but ash. The widow held the broken beacon in her hands. Its light flickered weakly, dying. She looked at the farmer, her voice heavy with sorrow. They will not be fooled again. The only way now is to send a true call, one that reaches both sides. He frowned, his jaw set. What kind of call? Her eyes glistened. A sacrifice, she explained, her words trembling. If I send the beacon with my life signature, they will think I am the rebel leader. They will burn only me, not the valley. The farmer's chest tightened, his voice sharp. No, I will not let them take you, not after everything. But she stepped closer, her glowing lines bright against the dawn. You saved me when you could have killed me. You hid me when your people came. You fought beside me when mine attacked. Her voice broke, but she forced the words. My only offer still stands. I will work your fields by day. I will warm you by night. Until the end, but today the end must be mine. The farmer shook his head fiercely. I have lost too many. I will not bury another, not you. She touched his face, her hands trembling. You carry scars, but you do not carry hate anymore. Let me take the fire so you can carry hope. For the first time, his eyes burned with tears. The silence between them was louder than the ships above. The engines roared, heat rippling through the air. The farmer grabbed her hand, holding it tight. "If you go, I go," he said, his voice rough. Her eyes widened, her heart breaking. "You would die for me?" He pulled her close, his forehead against hers. "No, I would live with you, even if it means standing against the fire itself." The ships opened their bays, fire building. The valley screamed with the sound of burning skies. The widow raised the beacon, but the farmer's hand covered hers. Together they pressed the command. A signal burst upward, brighter than the rising sun. But it was not a call of surrender. It was a call of defiance. The beacon screamed across the skies, broadcasting words in both human and alien tongues. Not of rebellion, not of betrayal, but of unity. It carried the truth that one human and one alien had fought side by side, had chosen life together, had refused hate. It reached the ships, and in that moment of doubt, hesitation rippled through their ranks. The fire that was meant to fall paused. The commanders argued, the orders wavered. For a single heartbeat, destruction held its breath. Below, soldiers gathered at the edge of the farm, their rifles ready. The commander who once threatened the farmer now shouted for his capture. But his own men hesitated, staring at the beacon's light. The widow stood tall, her voice echoing through the signal. "I am no rebel, I am no traitor, I am only a widow who chose to live and a farmer who chose to see me as more than an enemy." Her words broke through silence like fire through dry grass. The valley listened. The soldiers listened, even the skies seemed to listen. The farmer raised his rifle, standing at her side. "You want to burn us?" he shouted to the heavens. "Then burn us together. But know this, you will burn the last truth left in this valley, the truth that war cannot kill." The widow reached for his hand, their fingers locking. Together, they stood beneath the fire. Two small figures against the endless sky. The ships above trembled in indecision. Some engines dimmed. Others burned hotter. Commanders shouted, soldiers argued, but the signal kept shining. The beacon kept screaming its truth. That survival was not betrayal. That love was not weakness. That even in ashes, hope could bloom. At last, the fire above pulled back. Not out of mercy, not out of kindness, but out of fear. Fear that the story of one widow and one farmer could spread farther than flames. The ships drifted, their shadows fading. The valley exhaled, saved, at least for now. The widow fell to her knees, the beacon dimming at last. The farmer caught her, his arms strong, his voice trembling. "We live," he whispered. "We live another day." She looked up at him, her eyes glowing faintly. "Yes," she breathed. "But we live together." The farm was scarred, the fields burned at the edges, the barn broken, the soil blackened. But within the ruins stood two souls who had chosen each other, no longer thief and farmer, no longer enemy and enemy, but something new, fragile and dangerous yet alive. As night fell, the stars returned clear and sharp. Ships still lingered at the edge of the sky, but their fire no longer owned the valley. The farmer and the widow walked hand in hand, their steps slow but steady. They had made their choice, and the world had seen it. Her only offer had become their only truth. And in that truth, humanity found something greater than war,